you're going to hear all that feedback. So
You
I'm not
don't
gonna turn it
necessarily
on.
need to because you'll get picked up by the microphone.
Right.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight is Monday, March 23rd, 2020. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St.
This
Peter.
conference will now be recorded.
We are in the governor's room of the community center, as usual, with a few less people. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You'd like to call David League.
Everyone should, well, first of all, what we're going to start out with is a roll call since we have a little different format here tonight. So Barbara, if you want to do that.
Mayor Zeman,
Here.
Councilmember Noel,
Here.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember DeVos,
Here.
Councilmember Grams,
Okay, we'll move on. He was here earlier, so when he joins, we'll make sure to recognize him as he joins.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Here.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Here. We have everyone present. Mr. Grams, we had him. We're going to, should we try to get him back up and do a short little recess while we try to do that?
Give me just a chance. If you guys want to start doing the approval of the agenda in the minutes, I'll
All
give him a
right.
ring and see what we can make work out.
So we'll try to get a hold of Steve. We'll go over the agenda. The agenda, everyone should have gotten a copy of. There is an addition to the agenda, and that would be under new business, letter D, and it is a resolution declaring continuation of the emergency declaration, which I have issued today, and there'll be more explanation about that when we get to that point. With that change, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Noel so moves.
First-
Bruflat seconds.
First by Shannon, second by Emily. All in favor of the agenda with the change, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Agenda is approved with that one change. Next, we have the minutes from our March 9th, 2020 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 7. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Bruflat moves to approve the minutes.
Okay, we had a little carryover here, so I'm going to have Ed Johnson do the approval and Emily on the second, since you both were up at the same time. Next up, we have a public hearing,
If
and,
I could, Mr. Mayor, we'll go all those in favor signify by saying aye on that one.
oh, did I not do that?
No.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
All those in favor of the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved.
Mayor
Now
Chuck,
we will go to the public hearing.
if I could, Mayor Chuck, before we do that, we have, I believe Steve Grams might be listed as caller 3. Steve, is that you? We want to make sure to list you as being present if that's you, Steve.
Yes, that's me, Todd. I'm number 3.
All right, thank you very much, Steve. Sorry, Chuck, if you go forward with the public hearing?
Yep, so we will, next item up, or the item up is the public hearing. And Todd, if you want to go over some of the procedures?
So, Mayor and members, as you know, public hearings are meant for public input. Our goal is to provide an opportunity for that to occur. And so 5 minutes is set aside. We have a process that we utilize, and I won't go into detail since we have a little bit different arrangement tonight. But anyone that wants to participate has the ability to participate. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. The public hearing, we will open the public hearing for the petition for the annexation of land. And that public hearing, it'll be started at 7:09 p.m. on Monday, March 23rd, 2020. So first up, we have the presentation by the staff. Todd?
So,
Or
Mayor-
is
Mayor
Russ
members-
going to do this?
Yes, please, Russ will do this. There he goes. He's going to be set to go.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended the annexation of 2 small parcels of land, and you can accomplish that by ordinance as per Minnesota state statutes. The particular statute would be that the two parcels are completely surrounded by lands that are currently within the city limits. All of our zoning maps going back as far as 1994, and that's the earliest one I can actually find a physical copy, have shown that these parcels were within the city limits, and it appears that they had never been appropriately annexed and that the maps are in error. One of the parcels is owned by the Ruth Ann Wilberg Trust, can be generally described as the KRBI radio tower site, and there is a map on page 6 of your packet. The other very, very small parcel is owned by Gustavus College, and that is immediately adjacent to the Wilborg property as well as the balance of the Gustavus campus. I have talked to Mr. Wilberg, who operates the Edward Jones Financial Advisory Operation, and the husband of Ruth Ann, and he has consented to the annexation. I've also talked to the Vice President of Finance of Gustavus Adolphus, who additionally has consented to the annexation. The Planning and Zoning Commission initiated the annexation action so that those two property owners wouldn't, in fact, be charged for correcting the city's mapping error. It is proposed that when the properties are annexed, that the Wilborg property be zoned as C3 to match the balance of the Wilborg property, and then that the Gustavus small sliver of land be zoned EID, Educational Institutional District, again to match the balance of the Gustavus campus. I do have correspondence in my file from Oshawa Township consenting to the annexation with no expectation of any type of shared taxation. And I will mention the fees because that had come up in a conversation earlier today. The city charges $350 for the annexation, plus an additional $5 an acre with a $100 minimum. The $5 an acre and $100 minimum are actually charges that would be paid in advance or paid further to the state of Minnesota to accomplish the annexation. In this particular instance, those are not going to cover our expenses due to the length of this extraordinary long legal description. I will note, Mr. Mayor, that the Planning Commission has recommended that you adopt the prepared ordinance annexing the parcels by ordinance, and that public hearing of tonight's public notice of tonight's public hearing has been mailed to all the property owners within 1/4 mile of the site, has been published in the St. Peter Herald, and has also been posted at City Hall as necessitated by statute. And that would conclude my report.
All right. Thank you, Russ. We do not have an applicant here, as we can see. Public comment, there also is no one here. As we talked previously, if the council can wait until the item comes up under our new business, that would be much appreciated, and we can ask Russ some questions then if you have questions. Therefore, we will close the public hearing for the purpose of an annexation of land at 7:12 p.m. on Monday, March 23rd, 2020. Next up, we'll address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 9 and concludes with the resolution on page 31. It includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to RDP Technologies for internal heat tube assemblies for $10,200. To True Green for 4 applications of fertilizer and weed control for Community Spirit Park for $13,680. Midway Ford for a 2020 F550 4x4 cab and chassis truck. The following license applications, they're all for temporary gambling. To the St. Peter Ambassadors for 1,000 South Minnesota for $613.20. To Gustavus for 800 West College for May 25th, 20. To Gustavus again for 800 West College for 11/2/20. And to the Nicollet County Pheasants Forever for 400 Union Street for September 12th, 20. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for March 5th, 2020 through March 18th, 2020. Does anyone, and I will go around and check with everyone so no one gets missed, does anybody have any questions concerning the consent agenda. Ed?
I have none.
Shannon?
No questions, just a sincere thanks to everybody who served as election judges and was listed in the packet.
All right. Carrie?
No questions.
Steve?
This question is addressed to Pete Moulton. Is the original tubes for the wastewater plant, or is this have these been replaced before?
These have not been replaced before. They're another function of the augers that we replaced before. And we thought we'd get a couple more years out of them, and we did, so now it's time to replace them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moulton.
Any more questions, Steve?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Regarding the True Green fertilizer and weed control, Pete, I was wondering if you know what the chemicals are that are being used. And I had seen on their website that there was an organic option. I didn't know if we had looked into anything like that or something that, I just want to know what kind of chemicals we're talking about. If you could talk about that.
Well, I believe there's a three-pronged fertilizer application is how we're looking at it. We are using an organic compound with urea being a part of our fertilizer application. If we wanted to be true organic, we would have to apply either manure or some sort of application in that manner, and we don't have that equipment. I don't know if the public would accept that from an application point of view, probably because of the odors and the exposure to that. And so this is more of a neat, synthetic, organic fertilizer from that point.
Thank you, Pete.
You had another question, Emily?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. Brad, any questions?
No questions.
All right. If not, the consent agenda, is resolution appears on page 31. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Mr.
This is
Mayor,
Shannon.
this is Steve Grams. I second it.
Did you get that, Barb? I didn't catch the first.
I think it was either
Shannon, I
or Carrie.
believe, was the
Shannon
motion.
was the first?
Steve is the
Okay.
second.
Steve's second. All right. Any other questions? You can just blurt out now if you have one. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next up, we have unfinished business, which there is none, so we will move to new business. And the first thing up is the annexation petition. And Russ, if you want to field some questions or give us a little more background if you need to.
Yeah, I guess I've just considered this to be housekeeping and trying to correct an error that we've identified. And again, it precedes 1994, so I don't know or care who to blame. We're just trying to get it corrected, and I didn't believe it would be controversial with the neighbors or anyone to that extent. So if you have any questions, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay, questions? We'll start this time with Shannon. Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Carrie?
No questions.
Steve?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
Two questions. How much money, how much are the fees, and then where is that money coming from?
Well, it initiated by the Planning Commission. It's essentially a transfer within my budget from a line item then to a revenue. So there's no incoming money, and then the cost of the publication will be borne by the city. Ms. Luker, when I talked to her, she's estimating that to be $500 to $700, unfortunately. And then again, there has to be a $100 payment made to the Minnesota Boundary Adjustments Board so that they can effectuate the change, and the administrative law judge will sign off on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
No, we're-
if I may jump in on that one.
Yeah.
When you set your rates typically at the last meeting of the year or the first meeting of the year, the fees for these kind of activities, we try and set them so that we anticipate that this is as close to break even as possible. Each one has a unique set of costs based on the length of the notice that's required or necessary. So in some instances, frankly, we might make $1 or $2, and in some instances, we might lose $1 or $2 on this process, depending on a couple of different factors. But we try and set that fee in the middle.
Okay. Emily, you had another question? Emily?
Oh, sorry, no further questions.
Oh, I thought you said you had 2. I'm sorry. Brad, any questions?
No questions.
And Ed?
No questions.
All right. With that, the resolution, or excuse me, the ordinance this time for the, and I'm on the wrong page here. There we go. The ordinance, the city of St. Peter annexing land located within the township of Oshawa in Nicollet County of approximately 1.03 acres. That ordinance appears on pages 38, 39, and 40. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson, second.
Ed first and Carrie second. All right. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Our ordinance is approved. Next up, we have a cold weather rule extension. Todd?
Mayor and members, the information starts in your packet on page 41. This would be an extension of the state statute. We are not extending the state statute, but rather adjusting your policy to provide an additional month of cold weather rule. From a practical standpoint, what this means is that rather than on April 22nd, and it's important to understand the dates here, rather than on April 22nd, we shut off electricity to those folks that do not meet the payment requirements or the delinquency requirements set in City Council. We now are extending that into the 3rd week of May, as it's articulated within the resolution, which is on page 43. That date is May 22nd. So we are changing the requirement from April 20th in this instance to May 22nd. This is certainly something that the council could review, but again, it's important to understand those dates and that we're in March today. So that extends it actually a month, but a couple months from today. So I think that's an important part of this. This is being done as a one-time adjustment based on the challenges that we see some of our utility customers may face with the COVID outbreak and folks being at least temporarily unemployed. So our goal is to help those customers that are already struggling with their utility bills. Now, they may have received assistance from the Salvation Army or Minnesota Valley Action Council or others, but this provides them another month. We would still put limiting meters in place, and we've talked about limiting meters in the past, but this would provide for no shutting off of power until that May 22nd timeline. The resolution is on page 43, and Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer questions that I can.
Okay. We'll go to questions, and this time we'll start with Carrie. Do you have any questions?
I have one question. How do you connect with residents that this applies to? Is it via mailing? Do you have personal conversations?
So in this instance, we provide a notice because these are, the folks that would be impacted are those that are delinquent generally more than 60 days. And so we already have notices that go out, so those notices would be adjusted with the new timeline and would go out to them. And if they are a renter, that same notice goes to their landlord as well. That's a part of the regular standard practice. So we have not, at least right now, I'm not planning to do something additional with them. We certainly can, but typically that notice will spur someone to contact us, try and make a payment, set up a payment arrangement, and so then we can communicate it when we talk to them as well. But we already have a notification process for this, and we plan to use that process.
Thank you.
Steve, questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
Briefly, I'm wondering if, if the COVID-19 outbreak continues, past this May 22nd, will we be revisiting this and potentially pushing it for even further into the summer?
So from my perspective, Mr. Mayor and members, this is something that you could certainly push further. You could make a determination on a different date. We would like to have the dates be right around the 20th of each of those months because that's how your standard cycle flows. But certainly it is something that we can reevaluate. We do watch the numbers very closely, but I'll tell you there are a couple things that impacted this recommendation from staff. One of which is the weather. Second of which is the challenge that some of your customers are facing. Third of which is it school still being in session and the opportunity for remote learning that gets inhibited substantially if electricity doesn't flow for computers and internet and all of those kind of things. So I think there is the potential to review that, but one of the primary ones that we'll be able to do is understand whether people have really gotten involved with their own financial situation and have worked on a payment arrangement, because you do have payment arrangements that are available. So we'll be able to measure the numbers in that way. Right now, this likely impacts right around 30 to 35-ish customers. And so we'll know better based on payment arrangements in the future if that number has gone down. So that might be a driving factor.
Thank you.
Anything else, Emily?
No.
Brad?
Yeah, I have a question. Since this is driven by the COVID-19 state of emergency, what do you think it might be a better option to essentially set the end date to the, say, 20th of the month after the state of emergency, or maybe a month beyond that, the expiration, so that, hopefully, May 22nd would be far enough out, but so that we're not revisiting this at the end of April, saying, well, now we have to push it another month out. What do you think about the idea of tying it to the state of emergency as far as pushing it maybe a month beyond that? Todd?
So, Mayor and members, I would not necessarily be against that. The approach that I've kind of taken, and as I think I wrote in the memo, has been kind of a very, very conservative approach. So to protect your other utility ratepayers, as we talked about earlier, this is something that could be extended if you wanted to extend it, but without us knowing where that end time is for the statewide emergency declaration, I'd be hesitant just to set it pegged or indexed against that. I already have it on my calendar for a revisit at future workshops, so that I hope that we can again have additional data and know better as we get a little bit closer. It certainly is at the pleasure of the council to do as you wish, but that's the basis for my recommendation.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any problem doing that, but I think as long as we're all aware that it's not that big of a deal to revisit it and we know why we're revisiting it, I think it's a good point, Brad, but let's be optimistic, and if it doesn't work out, like I said, we can always extend it at that time. But
I think it's important to note, too, that we are in really unprecedented times.
yes.
And so this isn't something that, frankly, the council has ever done before, to my knowledge, or the knowledge that Barbara has with her institutional history here. So this is very, very unusual. And I think if the council does approve it, it certainly will help around 30 families and has the potential for additional data into the future.
Does that answer well enough for you, Brad? Or
Yeah, that does. Yeah, I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Ed, questions?
Todd, does the state have any set dates? Are they extending theirs also?
So no, not to my knowledge. That has not been a part of any emergency declaration that I've heard so far. And different utilities are handling this differently.
Okay.
Again, the city of St. Peter is a little bit unusual in that you're one of about 124, 125 municipalities that have an electric utility. Other cities have taken some measures to not turn off water services and those kind of things, so this kind of falls in that category. But from an electric standpoint, I'm unaware of others that are doing this extension. Again, to your question, I'm unaware that the state is doing anything with a change in their rule or the statute.
Okay. I'm okay with changing it to May 22nd. I was just wondering what the state has got planned.
Shannon, questions?
A lot of my questions have been answered, but I did want to ask about water and the potential for doing something similar for water. And I wondered, is this going to put any landlords on the hook for utilities, electric utilities that aren't being paid?
To answer your first question related to water, your policy really follows electric. And from a very crass standpoint, we don't shut off water, we shut off electricity because it's much more cost effective to do that, to require payment of water, sewer, refuse, environmental services. So electricity is the stick to enforce or demand payment. So water very rarely gets shut off. I'm sorry, Shannon, I missed now I've lost the second part of the question. Oh, landlords. So yes, this does potentially impact landlords from a water sewer standpoint, but it does not from an electric standpoint because, as you know, we cannot assess that necessarily to those landlords, but the water and sewer we can, if I remember that policy and the state statute correctly.
Shannon, the question about landlords come up usually every year when we go do assessments and other charges. I have a couple rental properties in town here, and if you know anybody that might be, it's the way I do it. It's not necessarily the right way, but I pay the utility bill, and then I send a bill or a copy of the bill to the tenant. Therefore, I know they're getting paid, because sometimes by the time the city, be honest, but by the time the city catches up with someone, might be a whole, I've gotten bills after people that have moved out where I have not done it this way, $800 to $1,000. So if you know somebody that's doing it, it's one way, not an answer, but it's one way that I found helped over the years on how to handle that. So anyway.
If I can mention one other item related to that, as we mentioned in the body of the memo, the amount of write-off that you have in these categories relative to the total amount of revenue stream that comes in with these is very, very, very small. And again, we're talking probably about 30 to 35 customers. And so I think the potential for landlords to be harmed substantially or the city to be harmed substantially is relatively low.
All right. Any other questions, Shannon? I'm sorry.
Nope, you answered my question.
All right.
Thank you.
The resolution extending Minnesota cold weather rule for the city of St. Peter for residential utility customers appears on page 43. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson, so moved.
Seconded by Bruflat.
First by Carrie, second by Emily. Now, any more questions, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the DNR Outdoor Recreation Grant Program application. And Pete, is this yours or is this Todd's?
I'll take it.
All right.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, city staff is asking that you allow us to apply for a outdoor recreation grant that's administered by the Minnesota DNR. What we're looking at is about a $400,000 project that would work to improve the entrance and the concrete walkways throughout the park, connecting a variety of different functions that go on in our park. As you can see on the map on page 46, we'd be looking at completing a portion of the ring road that's in there. And this is a 50-50 matching grant. And so what we have laid out is roughly improvements that would allow us to do in-kind work as well as contribute to the improvements. Our improvements would include $140,000 that's currently budgeted. As mentioned down in the fiscal impact, we budget $100,000 annually. That is part of the community center gift back to the Parks Department. In order to make some of these improvements, we then supplement that with $40,000 of our capital improvements within the parks. And then we add our in-kind services that give us about a $200,000 in-kind and cost-benefit sharing. The keys that are a part of this grant program include getting the submission of the grant in by March 27th. We have been in touch with the DNR, and we've gone through several fine-tunes on this process, and so we feel really good about the application. Awards would be announced in June. That pretty much gives the council time, should something go wrong where we have economic downfall or something to that degree, that we would not necessarily have to take this grant, but we would know from a standpoint of whether we received the funding or not at this point. The likely scenario then would be to go to engineering, start working on the project, and then have 21 and 22 in order to complete the work. As I mentioned before, this is through the DNR. We've had pretty much good success in working with the DNR through a variety of different programs and processes. We do have our hopes up that we'd like to get this grant, but as you guys know, usually what happens the first year is you get a nice little letter that says you also ran, but didn't quite have the information that they needed to make it work. We would then want to come back with that and try to make a system work for that process. But in a likely case, we still have this on our docket to do at least $140,000 worth of improvements coming up in 21. With that, I would request that you approve the resolution on page 47, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Questions? Steve, we'll start with you.
Pete, is there, you're successful in getting this grant, DNR, for concrete placement in the park. At some point, could this same process be used for replacement of the playground equipment that's in the parks plan for Central Square Park?
Yeah, I don't know if this grant itself would be used for that, but there are other grant applications that we could apply for, similar to what we did at Veterans Park by the swimming pool.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
All right. Emily, questions?
No questions.
Brad?
Sorry about that. Pete, how confident are you about getting the grant this time? Do you think it will just be a sorry, try again next year, or are you pretty confident in being able to cover the trails with this grant?
I'd love to get the grant, but usually what happens the first year is you're not too successful. There's a lot of people that have been reapplying already. So I don't get my hopes up, but it's worthwhile, and the staff has committed a little bit of time to make this happen. So if you don't put your hat in the ring, you'll never know.
And about how much would the 140, what projects or what part of the trails would you cover with 140,000? What area of the?
We'd probably go back to the Parks Board and probably set priorities and say, here's what you can do. We did talk about doing the plaza area and then working on connecting the different areas or the landings we'd go as far as our money would take us there from that point. The key that we've worked with the Parks Board so far is getting that plaza area that's really close to the pavilion established so that we can bring vendors in there for a lot of the events that are planned this summer. So that's really our top priority.
Thank you. I'm good for questions.
Ed, you have any questions?
Nope.
Shannon, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Carrie?
No questions.
Right. Pete, I have a question. You know, Brad kind of asked what our possibilities are on this, or probabilities. And every year, and how many years now, we've, not related to this, but we've been involved in applying for the Safe Routes to Schools. Do we have any, when does that come about, or do we have any indication on that at all?
You mean as far as how many years it took us?
No, as far as our possibility of getting it. Todd's laughing.
Yeah.
Did I ask a question that wasn't appropriate, or what?
No,
Go
it's
ahead,
just
Todd.
that Pete's killing me on this one because, and I'll let Pete, but last year you may recall that Jeff Domers and I went to the meeting and provided the information. This last cycle, Pete and went to the meeting. And so Pete, what was the results of that?
I know it was recommended on March 13th to the funding board that St. Peter's project be authorized. I haven't received an official notice yet, but I heard that we were successful in receiving it.
Very good.
Unless you have better information, Todd.
No, Pete, thanks for rubbing it in though, but good work to you
Yeah,
guys. So
I
we
was
haven't,
gonna say.
well, what Pete's saying is that we know we've been recommended to the funding board. We haven't seen official notice, so we're not 100% sure,
Right.
but we're 90% sure.
But the only difference then was that Pete went this year.
I know you're killing me, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's right. But as a point of clarification, Safe Routes to School funding could not be used in the park area.
Right,
So we
right.
couldn't use it. But
Right.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
And it's always one of these projects that keeps
Keep
coming up and
doing.
coming up, so I know it's been a few years.
Yep.
All right. The resolution authorizing submission of the DNR Outdoor Recreation Grant Program appears on page 47. Is there a motion for approval?
Noel moves.
Second.
I am Steve. Second.
Shannon first, Steve second. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have a resolution that was added onto our agenda for the continuation of the emergency declaration, which I did earlier today. So Todd, if you want to explain both items?
So, Mr. Mayor, I and the city attorney can tag team on this. As council members are aware, we had asked the mayor to issue an emergency declaration, and under state statute, that declaration can only last 3 days. However, the council can take action to extend it. Jim participated in a meeting with the League of Minnesota Cities just this morning, and so I'll let Jim talk about that and why we're bringing this to you tonight.
The recommendation was that each city pass its own emergency declaration. Todd and I had previously talked since the governor declared it maybe wouldn't be necessary, but in reviewing that webinar that I was listening to and reviewing the statutes, I think it makes sense. It's maybe a belt suspender. One advantage would be the emergency declaration would again assist in having meetings like this. But when you look at the statute, there's things in there that say you need an emergency declaration or getting certain aids. And right now, with as unique a problem we've got, we don't know where the aid is coming from or what's going to be the string. But this would be more of a thing that would tie up a loose end. So I would recommend that we go ahead and pass the resolution. and leave it basically open-ended until the council finds this emergency is over and then rescinds the emergency declaration. Hopefully sooner than later, but whenever.
Todd, do you have anything else you want to?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We will go to questions. Emily, we'll start with you. Do you have any questions?
Todd, maybe could you give maybe a quick summary of what Jim just said? I couldn't hear him very well. It was a little echoey.
Jim was talking about a webinar that he participated in or listened into today where the League of Minnesota Cities recommended this approach. He indicated that we had reviewed this previously, and since there's a state declaration, we didn't believe that there necessarily needed to be a local declaration. But the discussion on the webinar was that to maintain opportunity for additional funding, even though we don't know where funding might come from, even though where emergency dollars haven't been provided yet, this is maybe a belt and suspenders approach to ensure that we are in the queue if a declaration is necessary. And so that's the basis for the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Brad?
Todd, some questions related to, you said this basically gave you, your administrative superpowers, special purchasing privileges. Who does that all extend to? Does that extend beyond you? I mean, would that be like department heads? Where would that extend to?
So technically, I am responsible for all purchasing within the city of St. Peter. So all of that authority flows through the city administrator's office. Just to be clear, there is no intent or need to exercise that authority in this type of emergency. These were really designed for emergencies of property or substantial damage. Flooding, tornadoes is a great example. So there was an emergency declaration at the time of the tornado, and it allowed, under the state law, for us to do things in procurement of goods and services that normally would not be allowed to speed in the recovery. And so it does give us kind of superpowers, but it is not my intent to exercise those. There is no reason to exercise those in this instance. So I hope that answers your question, Brad.
So any spending during the emergency declaration would still flow through you. It wouldn't just, department heads wouldn't necessarily be able to just go out and make a purchase.
That's correct. Under your purchasing policy and the ordinances that you have in place and the job descriptions that are in place, all purchasing flows through the city administrator's office. So it doesn't give somebody a blank check to go out and do anything. Well, let me rephrase that. It gives the city administrator a blank check to go out and do some of those things. I have no intent of doing that whatsoever. We expect business as usual in that respect of your business and the financial affairs of your business.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
I'm done.
No questions.
Shannon? Question?
I just want to reassure, or that I hope that we will communicate some reassuring words to the residents of St. Peter that we're not declaring an emergency because the sky is falling, that it really is just sort of being conservative, wanting to make sure we've covered all of our bases.
You say cover your bases, I use a different terminology, but yeah, that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, Shannon, from a city administrator perspective, you are exactly right. Nothing is different from now if you pass the resolution, which extends the state of emergency to where it was 5 minutes ago. This really is, as Jim articulated, a belt and suspenders approach to ensure that if there is funding related to an emergency, that we have checked off this box, if it is a box that is presented to us.
Okay. Any other questions, Shannon?
Nothing further, thank you.
Carrie?
Just one question. So how is this communicated to the public via typical channels that we're using to communicate?
Yeah, so I anticipate that this will be part of the hot sheet. As you know, within the hot sheet, usually Barb provides a summary of the actions, so this will be listed in there. But frankly, other than that, it is not my intent to raise a big flag or talk about this to any great extent, because Again, this is really just trying to make sure that we're checking off that box. It does not change the nature of your business, the nature of our response today, how we will procure or finance any activities.
Thank you.
Steve, questions?
Questions, Mr. Mayor?
There are no other questions. The resolution declaring continuation of emergency declaration due to the COVID-19 emergency was given on an extra little handout or the email that all of you should have gotten. Is there a motion to approve?
Bruflat moves to approve.
Noel seconds.
Emily, 1, Shannon, 2. Any questions? More questions at this point? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. First of all, I'd like to thank council and staff for inviting us into your homes for the meeting tonight. We may be doing this a lot more often, and except for a couple minor glitches, it all seemed to go pretty well. One thing that I was going to bring up, and Todd's going to be talking more about it, but people are looking for things to do. I think we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I did it today because I thought, what a great time to do it. Census 2020. Everyone should have gotten the thing in the mail. I'd gotten 2 notices already in the mail, and it took me about 5 minutes to do it. Now, if you have more than 2 family members, it's probably going to take you longer, but otherwise, we're going to be working on the Census 2020 anyway, and if people are at home looking for something to do, please take the time to do that. Todd?
Mayor, I wish I had thought about putting that on the list. That's a great one to remind people about. Thank you. I do want to give just a short update on the COVID-19 impact within the city of St. Peter, talk about a few closures. I won't go into an extended discussion. That may happen at a future workshop. But we do want to mention that the community center, the library are closed. City Hall, Public Works are closed to the public, although we are still open and fully operational. I will mention that Transit MRVT continues to run, and so although our ridership is down, we think it's very important to continue to run for as long as we can as a part of this process, because as we've talked about many times, the people that use transit really need transit. It is one of their primary ways to get around. I will also mention in relation to transit that today was the first day of us transit delivering Meals on Wheels. We have a number of volunteer organizations that typically do that work, but as you can imagine, during this time, it's difficult for volunteers to keep up with that, and especially Meals on Wheels or those programs that use a lot of senior citizens as the volunteers to make that go. So that's a wonderful thing that we can do. I would encourage people to look at the hot sheet, which is on our website, or if you don't get it, you can certainly sign up to receive it. That's our weekly newsletter. Follow us on Facebook. We are posting our closings and some of the other activities that go on as a part of those Facebook posts, so watch for that. The library has some great programs going on, a number of different things that are going on, and then certainly we are tweeting a little bit about things that are happening within our community. Members, if you have specific questions about the response or what we're doing in relation to that, I'm happy to stand for questions. I do want to mention that you do have what I call a COVID team, so it's your department heads and other staff members that are really critical in making sure that your operations run. We have had a few people gone for reasons of taking care of their children, maybe other issues that they're facing, taking care of parents. But there's a considerable amount of change that's gone on in the employment environment as a part of COVID, and so you'll see potentially hours change, regular work schedules are modified, a lot of different things that we're doing to ensure that operations can occur and that we're taking care of our community, number one, and your employees as a part of that. So again, Mayor, I'd stand for any questions. If people have specific questions, I'm happy to try and answer or move on to other reports.
Why don't you move through all your reports, and then we'll ask at the end.
Okay, I do want to mention item number 2, Board of Appeals and Equalization. As you know, that meeting is set up here for the end of April. That meeting has been moved, at least right now, to May 19th. So we'll make sure to send out notice to all of you and get those on the calendar. Just because of the COVID declaration of emergency and social distancing and all those things, we've worked with the county, and that meeting has been moved to May 19th. Also, now the third one, goal-setting session. So Mayor Zeman and I have discussed this just because of the nature of those goal-setting sessions and because of some of the activities that I anticipate or that we are recommending that the EDA undertake this upcoming Thursday. I'm hoping to cancel the goal-setting session, but don't smile too much. I'm hoping that you will have some meetings that evening, so next Monday. So my hope is that we will cancel the goal-setting session, but have a special council meeting at 5:30 on the 30th, and then a workshop to follow with maybe 4 or 5 items that I had planned to do as a part of your goal-setting session. Things that, at least from my chair, are important that I give you an update on, and that we continue to move down the pipe. An example of that may be an update on the fire hall work that's been done by the building committee and the financing that we're working on with USDA is an example of one of those items. But again, a special meeting at 5:30. That special meeting would be designed to take up any recommendation that the EDA has going forward relative to the micro loan program that we discussed at your last workshop, and moving that forward. And then after that, maybe hopefully about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or so, maybe an hour and a half of a workshop that covers 4 or 5 of those items that I'd hope to cover at the goal setting session.
Okay. This is, well, let's, if anybody has any questions, we'll go around again of any of the topics that Todd brought up, and if you have a question about anything else in general. Brad, do you have any questions? Todd? Or anybody?
Yeah, does this mean we're on our own for dinner next Monday?
Brad, unfortunately or fortunately, yes, that would be the case. You'd be on your own for food in that instance.
Good question, though, Brad.
And we would plan to do that the same way we're meeting tonight, virtually. We'd plan to do that virtually on Monday.
Virtual dinner. Good, I'll do a virtual dinner.
I'll show a couple pictures.
All right. Ed, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Mayor.
Shannon, any questions of Todd or anyone else?
Todd, I think
Go ahead.
I think people might like to hear about the conference call that you had with local businesses and what we're doing at the local level to support businesses that are in St. Peter.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. We had what I thought was a very successful conference call, video conference, just like we're doing here today. And that was last Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning. We had 38 or 39 participants. I expect, frankly, more this Friday. And so part of our goal there was to reassure businesses that the local economic development authority in the city were taking actions to assist local businesses and what those are. It was also a great opportunity to provide lots of information about small business administration programs that were being planned and discussed, tips for employers relative to COVID-19 in response to COVID-19. That was sponsored and a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. We had folks from RETA there. John Considine was there to talk about some of the programs they have in place and provide information. And I think it's a great source. Not only did we have that meeting, but additional information was put on your website and on the Chamber's website so that businesses could access this. I can't speak for all the businesses that participated, but I can tell you that afterwards we received a number of calls that the information was valuable and that the time that they spent on the conference was time well spent. I think as we see conditional or a continual change in some of the things from Small Business Administration, DEED, which is the Department of Economic and Employment within the city or within the state of Minnesota, and we see work that's being done in programs administered through the Small Business Administration, that those will be very valuable to some of the businesses. And so I would encourage other businesses who are interested to participate. They can find information on our website or certainly through the Chamber of Commerce. Again, and I thank you for mentioning that. A lot of work went into that, and I thought I did personally think that it worked very well for folks.
Anything else, Shannon?
No, I sat in on that. I'm not a business owner, but I thought it was a great opportunity and good conversation. And so, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, we had a question and answer period at the end, which I thought was utilized very well. And then after we stopped, a group of downtown businesses stuck in on the call for a little bit to talk about once we're through this emergency, how they can do some marketing things together to really get people back into our downtown. Because we were on a roll. We really were, and I think those businesses were feeling really good. And so how do we do that again? So I think great participation.
Point of clarification, you mentioned John Considine. We're talking about John Considine the third,
The
I believe.
third, yes, sir, that's
not
correct.
our senator, rep, whatever he is.
Yeah.
Carrie, questions?
Real quick, so this meeting and future meetings are recorded and those are posted to our YouTube page, correct? And how does that show up? Is it audio or is it our video as well?
So, Carrie, how it will look, I'm trying to think of a great way to describe it. So Tony's out here in the room with us, and so he's recording it like your normal council meeting would be. So if you watch council meetings on SPPA, right now he has on what you would normally see as the PowerPoint. And so people at home will be able to see, well, frankly, kind of like the Brady Bunch, how we are here now. And then he has switched to cameras that are live when the mayor has talked, or Ed has talked, or maybe Barbara or I have, or Jim has talked. And so that's kind of the format that it will be in. So how you see it here, it will look a little bit different on SPPA, but I think usable, and we'll review that. And Tony said the audio is sounding really good, and the video has worked out very well too. So we're hoping for positive results, and certainly meeting the statutes and all the things that we want to do to keep people informed.
Thank you.
All right. Steve, questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
No questions.
All right. The last thing, which we usually do, we will also go around one more time. Does anybody have anything they would like to add for anyone's use? Ed?
Everybody hang in there. Bars will be open soon.
Shanad?
No, thank you.
Carrie?
No, thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
Just a general thank you, city staff, for all you're doing through this process. We appreciate it.
Brad?
Just a note on the Brady Bunch thing. It was sad I had to explain to my fifth grader what the Brady Bunch was today.
Yeah.
Because this actually came up. So.
I looked, I think Pete is sitting in Marsh's Square. If no one else has anything else to add, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Bruflat will second.
Ed 1, Emily 2. All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.